the American League Championship. I don't believe it. It just continues. My, oh, my.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go.
We're back. It's the FSS Plus Podcast Future Stars Series. I'm Jason Churchill here with Joe Doyle. Casey Bellin has the day off, his first day off in 27 years. Well, here we are, Joe. It's the winter meetings. Like this used to be, and it still is to some extent. It's a really interesting time of the off season that either is when and where some of the bigger deals occur, or it kind of spurs those deals. So we haven't had a major transaction the last 3 or 4 days. We had a little flurry there about 8-10 days ago, and this week it should pick up considerably. Do you expect the winter meetings themselves to be like super busy when it comes to big news, or do you think it's going to be another setup like the last couple of years? Because you remember 10-15 years ago when the winter meetings was like, 9 mega trades and most of the big free agents signed at the winter meetings, right?
Oh yeah. No, I miss those days.
Me too.
It seems
I
like
do.
a lot of just social media. It's just a lot of social media smoke. Let's see. I think there's going to be a lot of mid-market trades that take place. I think there's going to be a lot of moving of pawns and kind of positioning the board. I would be stunned if Yamamoto or Ohtani or Bellinger or any of the big ticket free agents sign here in the next even 4 or 5 days before like next Wednesday, next Thursday. But I do think, considering where the starting pitching market is, considering what teams need, I would be surprised if we didn't see some pieces shuffled around the league.
Yeah, you mentioned mid-level, kind of medium pieces. Are you thinking that's because teams are going to start learning they're not really in on Yamamoto, they're not really in on Ohtani, and maybe that they're not really willing to be in on Blake Snell or Eduardo Rodriguez or any of these other guys, so they start looking at the trade route and some maybe mid-level free agents teams, because it does sound like a lot of teams are balking at where Aaron Nola set the pitching market. There are, you get Blake Snell, 31 years old. Do you want to give him 7 years with his inconsistency? There are a lot of teams. It only takes one. I'm not saying he's not going to get his big deal, because he's probably going to. But are you just kind of thinking that there are teams that are bowing out there just because they're like, nah, we're not doing that?
I think there's a lot of different ways to acquire starting. I said mid-level, like mid-major types of trades. I kind of consider, and this is a me thing, I kind of consider the Juan Soto trade to ultimately be like a mid piece. And I know that's going to be really
even though Soto himself is not, but because it's 1 year of Soto and the cost is going to reflect more of a mid-level kind of a deal. Is that kind of how you think
I
about
look at it this way, like the Padres need so much pitching, and teams like the Blue Jays have pitching to offer. Teams like the Yankees have middling back end of the rotation, controllable pitching to offer. Like, I think Juan Soto could get moved in the next 4 days. I would actually be a little bit surprised if he didn't. So pieces like that, the Mariners and the Rays trades have been kicked up quite a bit. I think that could get moved. I think Dylan Cease would obviously be a monstrous move in terms of waves in the industry. But yeah, those are the types of things that I'm kind of expecting to happen. I think the trade market is going to heat up over the next 4 days. It seems to me like a foregone conclusion that the Blue Jays are going to find a way to move Alek Manoah in some sort of a deal to bring back something. Those are the types of deals, trades that I expect to take place between now and probably Wednesday afternoon.
Interesting. We'll talk about the draft lottery here. That's one of the events at the winter meetings. Also want to touch on, you mentioned one just a second ago. One thing that might surprise you if it did happen, one thing that might surprise you if it didn't. I have a couple of my own, so we'll get to that. And I want to talk about the Astros a little bit as well. It's a really interesting team that not a lot of folks are talking about right now, so I want to dig into that. But you mentioned Alek Manoah there, Joe. He was maybe the best pitcher in the American League in 2022, fell completely off planet Earth in 2023, from your perspective and folks that you've talked to and things that you've read and you dive into the numbers, like what are the issues there? Because on the surface, not to steal your thunder here, but on the surface, it seems like, well, his conditioning, probably some level of an issue. Velo down, command down. But when you look at some of the underlying things, when you look at things like, his active spin and things like, he's still got it. So you would think that there's a bunch of teams out there that would take a flyer on him. But my question here would be, like, one, what else do you see as an obstacle for Manoah to kind of get back toward what he was in 2022? And two, what is that worth in trade? How cheap is he going to be for clubs to acquire if Toronto puts him out there?
Well, my thing with Toronto is they've always seemed to be positioning themselves financially, right? They've always made trades over the last few years to move the needle, to keep themselves in a healthy zone with their payroll. And Alek Manoah is coming up on arbitration. Like he's had an accomplished early career despite his 2023 struggles. So he's going to get his first ARB year is not going to be cheap. And if Toronto has any hope of keeping Vlad and Bo in the future, and that's a conversation to be had down the line, I don't think there's any way that Alek Manoah fits into that equation. And considering what this starting pitching market looks like, Manoah's been able to post some pretty significant innings totals based on the amount of starts that he's had in 2021 and 2022. So in that respect, I think he's going to have some value. Now, the thing that I don't like, I'll just say that I don't like it. I don't like it. He seems to wear hit by pitches like a badge of honor. He led the league, or he led the American League in 2021 in batters hit. He led the league in 2022 in batters hit. And in 2023, it was really, really bad for a very long time. I think hit by pitch or batters hit per inning, he probably led the league, even though I don't have that pulled up right now.
He had 9 hit batters in 87 innings. 9 hit batters in 87 innings.
So
yeah, it's high.
So he was on pace for another 20 batter hit season. That can't happen in today's age. Guys are throwing too hard, and he's injuring important players in this game. And he seems to shrug it off in a way that, it's just part of the game. I'm just pitching inside. Well, no, you're not. You can't pitch inside, Alek Manoah. You seem to not be able to handle that. So commanding the fastball is something that has regressed. He's going to have to improve there. And if the slider doesn't get the teeth that it had in 2021 and 2022, maybe he's a guy that has fallen victim to the sticky stuff type of thing, because his movement profile on that pitch has fallen by the wayside. So I think there's probably a team out there that looks at Alek Manoah, sees what he's set to make this year and next year, and says, this is a pretty good bounce back candidate. I like this for innings. Let's go get him. But to your point, I don't think there's any doubt Toronto would be selling low.
But is that relationship, stressed at all beyond what you'd expect from a guy struggling to that level? I haven't read or heard anything in particular, but maybe you have, that maybe they just want to move on. Like, it's like the relationship's not as good as it once was. Let's get him a clean slate. Because a lot of times when that happens, and we've seen that around the league, when we hear these, oh, he needs a new voice, he needs, a new environment, which I don't necessarily buy all the time, but sometimes it's legit. Is that also kind of part of this? Is that an element in this decision for Toronto to maybe put Manoah out there and take a lot less for him than they could have got a year ago?
I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody in Toronto about that situation. I can only go off of what some of the other headlines were. He didn't immediately report to Dunedin. He didn't immediately report to the complex. I don't think he went missing. I think they kind of gave him hey, why don't you take a week and a half and just get away from the game for a little bit before he had to report back to rookie ball. Now, being demoted to rookie ball has nothing to do with his performance. I mean, a lot of guys go down to rookie ball to work on some things. They just simply didn't think he could fix what was wrong at the AAA level. So I don't want to say that was like relegate him to the lowest level as a punishment. It wasn't anything like that. But I think as a player, there's a certain amount of embarrassment that probably comes along with a demotion of that regard, and sometimes that can break a relationship. So it wouldn't surprise me, but I can't imagine that relationship between Manoah and the Blue Jays is as strong as it was at this time last year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I wonder if he's part of a bigger deal, but I got to tell you, as we're talking about this, the Dodgers make an awful lot of sense here. Not that that's going to be their big pitching thing, and we can get to that in a little bit, but the Dodgers have positioned themselves to spend money, so we expect them in on Ohtani and Yamamoto and Dylan Cease and Corbin Burns and all that. But Alek Manoah, like this idea, just generally speaking, has Dodgers written all. I mean, they made Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney look good, better than they've ever performed in any other uniform in their entire lives. The Dodgers did that. So Manoah's got Dodgers written all over it. I don't know. We'll see how that one winds down. That's an interesting one, though. Toronto getting busy, maybe moving Manoah to try to get a little bit back to prepare them for to 2024. I mean, you mentioned the Vlad Guerrero-Bo Bichette thing too. Beyond money, if they can get even one piece back for Manoah that helps them acquire pitching and take advantage while they do have Vlad Guerrero and Bo Bichette, no matter how long they're actually going to keep him, it might make sense to do that. All right. So winter meetings, the draft lottery.
Really quickly.
Go ahead, Joe.
Really quickly, Jason. Before we move on, I want to throw a hypothetical at you, and it's a trade idea. If you're Baltimore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's in division, so I don't think this ever happens. But if you're Baltimore, do you throw a Ryan Mountcastle for Alek Manoah deal out there? Toronto is looking for a bat. They need a bat.
If I'm Baltimore for the next 2 minutes, Adley Rutschman for Alek Manoah, done. No, I'm obviously kidding. That's an issue. Yeah, I would try to get involved because Baltimore's that ownership's not going to spend much. It seems like that front office there is being asked to be basically the Rays to a very large extent, which isn't uncommon around the league, unfortunately. But there's only one Tampa Bay Rays. That's a unicorn, right? So we'll see how the Orioles kind of approach this, but that's a really interesting idea. Are you thinking somebody like a Mayo or an Ortiz or somebody or a Cowser, somebody that aggressive, or somebody a little further down?
No, I'm thinking big league for big
just
league. I'm
thinking
Ryan,
like a Mountcastle. Okay.
Ryan Mountcastle for Alek Manoah.
And Mountcastle and Vlad share first base DH in that scenario in Toronto. This is kind of how you're thinking about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Assuming Brandon Belt doesn't come back. I mean, I think there's at-bats for Mountcastle in Toronto, especially with the way that roster kind of shapes up right now. What Merrifield isn't expected back, and I know they don't play the same position, but I think Merrifield did DH some in 2023.
He did. Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know. It's an interesting. It's fills a need for both teams.
The Twins would be another one that would be interesting to me. Losing Sonny Gray, it doesn't look like they're going to spend a bunch of money. They also lost Kenta Maeda. Tyler Maley's going to be out because he had surgery. They could use some pitching, so you would expect multiple moves at some level to some degree in Minnesota there, and taking a flyer on Alek Manoah. And if they can turn him around, makes a big difference and probably makes the Twins the favorite in that division again.
Austin, well, I guess they've already made a trade, actually. Austin Martin, Simeon Woods Richardson, they went over from Toronto. That was the Barrios trade. Right? Yeah, is Matt Wallner too much for Alek Manoah? There's a lot of holes in Wallner's game, but he does one thing very well.
Yeah, that's
he hits the ball very, very, very hard.
Yes, and he had a good year. Yeah, he had a good year.
He did.
He had a good year.
34% strikeout rate or something like that. But and he's on the older side of
so major league average. It's not, but
I wonder if that would be. I wonder if that would be. That might be a little bit too much to give up, given Manoah's current state. But
if I'm Toronto, I want Manoah going to the National League. But at the end of the day, I do want the best deal too. And if it's clearly a better deal trading him to Baltimore, even in the division, or Minnesota, then I guess that's what I'm going to do. But I would consider that. I'd rather not trade him and face him 4 times a year, moving forward, especially since he's got 4 years of control left, not ARB eligible until after next season. I'd be a little careful there who I trade him to as well. So that would certainly be a consideration. Alek Manoah, this is a really interesting conversation because, man, he was good in 2021 and 2022. Maybe we should have seen some of this coming because his strikeout rate between 21 and 22 sunk by 5% down to 22%. And then it sunk again, and his delivery went, to Cape Horn, for crying out loud. It was that was bad. Interesting conversation there. Alek Manoah with the Blue Jays. All right, MLB Draft Lottery, Joe. This is right up your alley. The That's I believe that's Tuesday. They're going to do the actual lottery is going to happen around 3:30 Eastern, I believe, and we're going to see the results on television at 5:30 Eastern, which is weird. You got thoughts on the draft lottery before that comes? Because we have no idea. Like, we know what the chances are and we know what the implications are, but from a draft quality standpoint and the implications of getting a top 6 pick this year, the implications of for the A's and the Angels and the White Sox and teams like that. What do you got on the draft lottery for Tuesday?
I mean, 7 months out from the draft, there seems to be at least it's early, but there seems to be a pretty big cliff after the first 3 picks. I'm sure that there's going to be a player or two that rise and make that, 4-5 range a better buffer zone. But right now, it's Nick Kurtz, it's Travis Bazzana, it's JJ Weatherholt. Now that's 2 second basemen and a first baseman. So inherently, that's not a great look for the draft. But I think if you land a top 3 pick in this draft, you're sitting pretty. And I think there's a conversation to be had that, with some of the new collective bargaining agreement draft penalties, I think there's a case to be made at picks 4, 5, and 6 that you don't want one of those picks. I'll use some examples here. So last year, 2023, this last draft was the first year of the draft under the new collective bargaining agreement. Small market teams or collective bargaining tax, collective revenue tax. What am I trying to say? CBT receivers, teams that receive money from revenue sharing. If they pick in the top 6 2 years in a row, they're knocked down to number 10 in the draft the third year. And the other side of that is large market teams, payers. They're knocked down to pick 10, like the Washington Nationals were this year, or this upcoming year, just after 1 year. So looking at how this draft shakes up, Jason, Oakland, who has the best odds to land the number 1 pick of any team in this draft, if they land anywhere in the top 6, they will not pick until at least pick 10 in 2025, which is already being considered a better draft, a healthier draft. Some other small market teams that are at risk, the Pirates picked in the top 3. They're currently projected to land the 8th pick. But if they land in the top 6, they fall to number 10 in 2025. So those are the 2 small teams that I'm watching, thinking, especially the Pirates, like, wouldn't you rather have the 7th or 8th pick than the 5th or 6th pick this year? Just considering what 2025 looks like. And then the other side of this, and I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, the large market teams. The large market teams in this one are the payers. They're the ones that are really interesting to me because the Chicago White Sox are supposed to land the 4th pick. The Cardinals are supposed to land the 5th pick, and the Angels are supposed to land the 6th pick. If any one of those teams land a top 6 pick, they will fall to at least pick 10 in 2025. The Mets are an interesting case. I'll get to them in a minute, but I talked to some folks earlier this week in front offices, analysts, people that handled the draft. Within some of those teams, they don't want to land a top 6 pick. They would, if there's a member of the White Sox front office that would rather pick 8th than have the 4th pick in 2024. I mean, I think that says a lot about not only the draft in 2024, but also the penalties that come along with it. Would you rather pick 4th this year and 10th or 11th next year, or 8th this year and potentially, with how bad the White Sox could be in 2024, 1 or 2?
Yeah, that's true.
So,
because this plays into the conversation we were just having. We're talking about pitching getting traded, and if the White Sox, who, like Mike Clevenger's not going to be back, they decline the option on Tim Anderson. They're shopping Dylan Cease. Eloy Jimenez is available. Teams are calling about Andrew Vaughn. Maybe they do something with Luis Robert coming off a career year and having played 140 plus games for the first time. You're right. That's a good point. And you know what, this whole, like you did preface this with, we are 7 months out, like things can change, but things don't often change from a draft, like a class strength sort of a situation. Like if you go in, Yeah, it really doesn't. It's like you're 7 months out, you're a year out, sometimes a year and a half out. You get a pretty good idea like how deep the draft is, where it might fall off. And I think at this point, if you're looking ahead, if you got to choose, and they don't, but if you got to choose, I could see why you wouldn't. You definitely wouldn't. Even if you just think next year's draft is 15 or 20% better, that could mean a player getting to you at 5 next year that you wouldn't get out of the top 2 or 3 this year, or at 8 next year that you wouldn't get out of the top 2 or 3 this year. So unless you're getting the, one of those first couple of picks, that makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting. Are there other clubs that have a decent shot to get a top 6 pick? You mentioned the Angels, you mentioned the White Sox, you mentioned the Cardinals with the 5th pick. Are there any other clubs that are paying teams? You mentioned the competitive balance tax and the teams that pay into it. You do that once and you drop. And the teams that receive it, you have to do it twice and then you drop the 3rd year. But are there any other of the bigger market type clubs like the White Sox and the Angels, or is it just those 2, maybe 3, depending on where the Cardinals land?
It is. So the Cardinals are a payer, so they will see their pick fall to at least pick 10. And the interesting thing about this draft is the way it shakes out. Let me read you the top 9 chances to land a lottery pick. Oakland, Kansas City, Colorado. They're the top 3 with 17% chance each, 18% chance each. White Sox, Cardinals, Angels, Mets, Pirates, Cleveland. Out of those 9 teams, only Kansas City, Colorado, and Cleveland will not be penalized in 2025 if they land a top 6 pick. So what that basically means is 2025's draft order is going to be chaos. We could see 5 teams all shift down to the 10th pick in 2025 and then reorder themselves based on their record from 2024. So this could all end up with like a team having the 6th best odds to have the number 1 pick in 2025 end up having the best odds to have the number 1 pick in 2025 because everyone ahead of them shifted down.
Right.
Now,
and that's going to open it up for some clubs that pick down in the teens a lot. Teams that pick
Big
like
time.
14 to 18. That's really where that opens that up and shifts everybody north. That's where it becomes really interesting.
If we were to use 2024 just as an example, and we saw Oakland, Chicago, St. Louis, and the Angels all fall to pick 10, and we assume the Mets move down 10 spots because they exceeded 277 million. That's 5 teams that fall, plus the Nationals, who are already at 10. That would move the Boston Red Sox, who have the 12th best odds of landing the number 1 pick, up to having a lottery selection in 2024 had it kind of all worked out, if it works out that way. I did want to bring up one more team because they probably have the most to gain and the most to lose, and that's the Mets. The Mets currently are projected to land the number 7 pick. They have a 5.5% chance of landing the number 1 pick and a 38% chance of landing a top 6 pick. Because they went over 277 million in payroll this year. If they don't land a top 6 pick, their draft pick will fall 10 spots. So if they land the 6th pick, they pick 6th. If they land the 7th pick, they pick 17th. And that is the difference of, I don't have the numbers in front of me, about 1.6 to 1.8 million in your bonus pool, which is a massive amount of money in any draft.
Wow. Yeah. The Mets currently with a 5.5% chance to win the lottery. That's crazy. That's crazy. A team like the Mets that spends like that, the difference. And even in a down year, I don't know, if you're the Mets, you may not care that much. You may not get much of an opportunity to get in the top 6, anyway. So you might as well take it when you can get it, because the chances, if you're just going to spend like that, the chances you go 75 and 87 and end up in with a decent chance to get into the lottery. Like right now, what are their chances are 7th best. I probably wouldn't bet on that anymore if I'm the Mets. I plan on being better than that and being down in the teens, or being one of the teams that, have no chance. That land 19th
Yeah.
to the bottom. So if you're the Mets, this is probably one of the rare situations where you're kind of rooting for it because you're not going to get that chance otherwise, right? Like that's what's different about. And you mentioned Pittsburgh and the Angels and the Cardinals and the White Sox. Interesting, yeah. The competitive balance tax, like the threshold and teams that pay into it and the teams that receive it. It's interesting how that's starting to and how it's cut in half essentially. How that impacts not only the draft, but obviously those teams' payroll. So interesting. MLB Draft Lottery. That's Tuesday. It's this Tuesday from Nashville, televised at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, according to MLB.com. By the way, good stuff there. The draft, always on our minds. The draft, Joe. I'm really interested in the top. It is an illness. I'm really interested in the top of that draft, not just to see, how it happens, how it turns out. And if the three guys at the top, stay there and then, it's always interesting to see how teams want to use their pool. Cause they might be the top three talents, but they're not necessarily getting taken top three. But right now, 3 college guys at the top. Is that right? 3 college guys at the top of your board?
I mean, I don't have a high school kid in the top 10 right now. Yeah, it's not a healthy draft right now. I think there are some guys. I think Connor Griffin could cement himself as a top 5 pick by the time we get around to the draft. He has all the tools in the world. But other than that, like the other high school guys on the board right now, I mean, there's a first baseman. There's a PJ Morlando as a first baseman. There's a right-handed high school pitcher named Levi Sterling near the top of my board. I think 24th. So I don't know, man. I just, you look back at the years like 2022 and, you look at Jackson Holiday making that surge from 28, 35, 40, wherever you had him up to the number 1 pick. I mean, I just don't see that player in this class. There's a kid by the name of Carter Johnson I think he's out of Alabama. I'm trying to Oxford, Alabama. He's got a pretty swing. He's a shortstop. He's 6'2". Maybe he makes a big jump, but the guys that generally surge, like what they look like, they're just hard to find.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the prep guys do seem to be the most likely to make that kind of meteoric rise. Like you mentioned, Holiday. Like he was always thought of as a first round guy, but it took a little bit for him to become like, well, he's definitely going top 5, and then going where he ultimately went. Interesting. Carter Johnson, I think he's a 2-way player in high school. Just a shortstop. Carter Johnson probably in pro ball.
Yeah, just a shortstop. It's a sweet swing. It hasn't been a great perform. Like here's the thing, like Jackson Holiday, his junior summer didn't perform very well, swinging for the fences, kind of tried to blow everybody out of the water, right? Mm-hmm. Carter Johnson didn't perform as well as people would like, but he's smooth on the dirt. It's a really pretty swing. Maybe he kind of unlocks a new gear and surges up into the top 10. But yeah, like, I mean, finding those guys that have the ceiling to get to that top 10 threshold, they're tough to find.
Interesting. All right. So we'll look for that on Tuesday. We'll get Joe's reaction on the next episode of the podcast. One of the things I like to think about when the winter starts, and while the off season began like officially almost a month ago now, Joe, I like to think about like, what do I expect to happen this winter? Like there's like a couple of things that I definitely expect to happen. And there's a couple of things where I'd be like, okay, we're hearing buzz about this, or we're hearing fans clamor for this, but I'd be really surprised if this happened. I'm just wondering if you have one of each of those things. One thing that seems possible, but you'd be really surprised if it happened. And then one thing that you'd be really surprised if it didn't happen. And the low-hanging fruit for me is the Dodgers adding an impact starter or two. I'd be shocked if they didn't add at least one, whether that's Yamamoto or Ohtani or Cease or Burns or someone like that, that something like that. And maybe don't steal mine. Maybe don't.
All right. How about we do this?
What's one thing that will surprise you? Let's start with that one.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do that. And then I want to hear yours.
Okay.
For me, I would just be absolutely stunned if the Toronto Blue Jays ended up with Shohei Ohtani. It's kind of gotten some legs in national reporting over the last couple of days. Listen, the way I look at it, and Ohtani is a unicorn, and he, kind of opens the parameters of what a team can and should ever do with their payroll. I think we both understand that and agree with that.
Right.
But the Blue Jays have outwardly come out and said that they have kind of a payroll ceiling in the past. And nothing is, I've never heard anything connecting Shohei Ohtani to Toronto and playing in Canada. Listen, playing in Canada is not, it's not nothing. As much as, Blue Jays fans would like to just say it's the same as playing in the United States.
Not.
Customs is different. Travel is different. It's different. I would be stunned if that took place. That's my I would be stunned.
So you'd be stunned about that. So I'm gonna dig a little deeper for mine. Mine's not about Ohtani. Mine's not about Yamamoto. I would be absolutely floored if Blake Snell goes to the Mets. I'm going to be very specific here. There's been a lot of links to the Mets in starting pitching after they traded Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander to save some money. They're covering some of that, some of those salaries, but to save some money, which was a brilliant move, by the way, as was the Angels doing what they did to get under the luxury tax threshold there over the summer. But the Mets are not going to stand pat. They're going to spend if they get the opportunity. They're going to be in on Ohtani. They're going to be in on Yamamoto. As long as those players have interest, they're going to be willing to spend the money. So I wouldn't be surprised but I would be absolutely floored no matter what Ohtani decides or what Yamamoto decides. If Blake Snell specifically lands with the Mets, I can't see it. I can't see it at all. I think Blake Snell's a West Coast guy. He's familiar in Tampa. I could see him signing with the Yankees before I could see him signing with the Mets. That's one rumor. That's one player that's been attached to a team and a team that's been attached to a player that I absolutely cannot see that working out. I cannot see Blake Snell signing with the Mets. I think he would take significantly less money to stay out of New York with the Mets. It's gut feel more than anything, but that would blow me away, Joe.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah. I can't help but think Blake Snell is going to be a Giant. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's a fit.
What do you think? I mean,
I could see Giants. I could see Dodgers. I think those two teams are fits. To be honest with you, if Jordan Montgomery doesn't go to Texas, I could see Blake Snell going to the Rangers. I really could. I could see him going to the Rangers. It's a $150 million deal plus. There are teams out there already willing to pay that kind of money. It just depends on what the match is. So, all right. So that's something that would surprise us, if it did happen. What would surprise you if it didn't?
I want you to start because I think mine is going to be a good transition into the next topic, and I want to start there.
Okay. Excellent. Good stuff there. That's a good call there, co-host.
Hey, man.
Yeah. So moving away from the obvious one, the example I used, the Dodgers getting impact starting pitching, because I would just be that's bonkers. The Dodgers starting next season without Burns, Cease, Yamamoto, or someone like that would be the biggest shocker of the offseason for me. But beyond that, because again, that is the easy one. I would say the Yankees doing something huge. And I don't necessarily think that means it's good. I think the Yankees are either getting Juan Soto, or they're trading for Dylan Cease, or they're trading for Corbin Burns, or they're signing Yamamoto, or they're signing Ohtani, or something enormous, something that kind of shakes the baseball world. Yankees, big ticket activity. If there was none, I would be shocked. Brian Cashman's on the hot seat, Jason. Right? Brian Cashman on the hot seat,
yeah,
Joe?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
I think for sure. I'm curious if you were a Yankees fan, would adding Cody Bellinger this winter, exclusively, that's the only ad.
No,
would that be enough, or would that scare you?
Scare me, no, but that's not enough. I mean, what's the biggest issue on that team? Two biggest issues on the team are one, healthy, guys being healthy, right? They've had the talent, but they just haven't stayed healthy. But other than that, it's rotation, right? Who's the number two starter on that team right now? It's Garrett Cole and pray for rain. Who's the number two guy? Seriously, I don't know who the number two. I don't think they have a guy that legitimately fits the number two spot. I mean, is that Nestor Cortez? No. Even though he's flashed, over the last couple of years. Severino's gone to the Mets. Clark Schmidt hasn't proven a whole lot yet. Like where is that's why I think they should be in on they should be in on Snell. They should be in on Eduardo Rodriguez. They should be in on Stroman. They should be in on Yamamoto. They should be in on, I'm leaving somebody out, Cease and Burns, and any good pitcher that might be available, the Yankees should be in on, because that ballpark, if you're not striking guys out, that ballpark, you're going to give up runs. And you have to be of that kind of impact ilk of a starting pitcher. And maybe that's why the Yankees might prefer a Corbin Burns over a Dylan Cease, because it's 1 year and it's a little cheaper and it buys you some time to find more long-term answers. But, they're kind of relying on Carlos Rodon to be healthy, because if he's healthy, then there's your number 2 and you kind of have co-number 1s, but you certainly can't count on that either. So I would be floored if they didn't do something big, but you're right. That's a really good point. It really can't just be one thing. If they sign Yamamoto, great. What else did you do? Because that was a very ordinary roster last year, considering guys are aging. You don't really know what you're going to get from your second-year shortstop. You don't know what you're going to get from Giancarlo Stanton, who's eating up some payroll. Aaron Judge has had his own injury issues. DJ LeMahieu's older and not quite the hitter that he was a couple of years back. Like, there's not a lot of good bets. There's not a lot of high probability guys on that roster. Garrett Cole, like, other than that, do they have a player that's a 3-win player or better that's kind of automatic other than Garrett Cole? Garrett Cole is pretty much automatic. Doesn't have a significant injury history.
Aaron Judge is definely there if he's healthy. Aaron Judge,
but if he's healthy, that's what I mean, though. Like, if he's healthy, right? So it's really tough to, man. It's really tough to see.
You don't believe in Ben Rortvedt. How do you not believe in Ben Rortvedt?
I do. I actually secretly,
have you been living in a cave?
Out, I'll admit, he is the greatest player of all time. I'm sorry. My bad. Brian Cashman's a genius. So this was funny about Cashman, by the way. So I think 2 or 3 years ago, I was on Brian Cashman is underrated and catches too much, flack. Seriously, that's where I was. But after the last couple of years, the inactivity, the lack of creativity, the lack of foresight has completely flipped me. I think he should have been fired already. So I'm not saying Cashman gets to spend what he wants, but he can probably trade what he wants. And I'd be floored. I'd be shocked if they didn't do something there. So, that's where I am. Yankees.
All right. Let me give you 2. And the second one is going to lead into our next topic.
Bonus.
But the first one I think is a little bit more 10,000 feet. I would not be shocked if the Detroit Tigers found a way to add $30 or $35 million to their 2024 payroll. Historically, the Tigers have been a team that spends a lot of money, and they're in a really nice market, and they've got some young pieces, and they've got a decent amount of young pitching if it can stay healthy.
Right.
I think they ranked in the bottom third of the league, in 19th, 20th, 21st in payroll last year. I think Scott Harris has kind of got a window now that he can do some spending, and it doesn't have to be at the top of the market. But if you're the Detroit Tigers and you can bring in, a Josh Hader, or just shorten up the games or do something like that, I just feel like the Tigers have not been spoken on quite enough this winter as a team that historically has kind of played at the big boys table.
Yeah, they went out and got Kenta Maeda. They picked up Mark Canha. Those are more floor moves. Raise the floor, get some stability out there, and it may come at the perfect time. We saw Spencer Torkelson, who was the number 1 pick a few years back, who I'm not a huge fan of. I never thought he was the best prospect in baseball, but starting to hit, starting to show what he can do. I think we like Riley Green. It's one of my favorite young players in the game. Javier Baez, whatever he can give you is kind of a bonus at this point, but they have some other guys coming up. Colt Keith might be able to make an impact for them this year. It seems like and here's another if Tariq Skubal can give them 28 to 30 starts and they can add to that rotation, like you don't even have to sit around and wait for the Casey Mizes and the Matt Mannings to be healthy. You can do some serious damage. So the Tigers adding payroll. Yeah. Right now they have $87 million committed for 2024. So there's a lot of room. That's going to be,
what were they? I think they ended last year at about 115 or 120. Like, I would be surprised if they didn't push that number closer to 130.
Full 40 man at the end of the year was 121 and change. If that's
I would be
full 40
stunned
minutes
if
a
they
game.
weren't closer to 135, 140 this
Yeah,
upcoming season.
which puts them $45 to $50 million away just for
Yeah.
2024. That's two
And
big
think
ticket
about it.
players.
Think about it. The Twins have holes. They've got holes to fill. The Guardians, it looks like they're going to have pitching, but where are they going to get any runs? That was
Right.
I think, the worst offense in baseball last year, or close to it. The White Sox are tearing it down. Like, this is a good opportunity for Detroit to kind of put its hat back in the ring and establish itself as one of the premium organizations that's run in baseball. The Tigers have no business being this bad, and I think they'll be back up where
Yeah.
they're supposed to be.
That's a good
All
call.
right, so let me throw you this last one. It would not shock me if Alex Bregman is wearing different colors in 2024. I think if the Astros were to move him, I don't think they would get a whole lot for him, to be totally honest. I'm not saying they wouldn't get anything for him,
Mhm.
but he's only got a year left on his deal. I think he's owed about $30 million this year, and he's frankly probably not a $30 million player away from Minute Maid Park. That being said, they're going to have to decide if they want to pay Bregman in 2025. Jose Altuve is coming up. They're going to have to pay him. Justin Verlander is coming up. I don't know whether or not that reunion is going to take place, but that farm system is extremely thin right now, and they've gone through quite a turn the front office upside down over the last two seasons. They've lost a lot of talent, and Dana Brown is in there now, and he just does things differently. So it would not surprise me if Alex Bregman is moved for, I'm not even going to throw out any ideas, but maybe a double-A pitcher with some upside, and a Vaughn Grissom type of player who could play third base, something like that.
Sure. Alex Bregman will be 30 at the end of March. He was a 4.3 win player by FWAR's measurements. He had 263, 363, 441 with 25 home runs last year in 161 games. And you're right, like he's making a little bit of money in 2024. But it's been a pretty good contract for the Astros, and I'm pulling up his deal right now. He will make $28.5 million, and there's no option here. This is a clean at the end of the year. He will be a free agent. But I'm glad you brought this up, because the Houston Astros have been a team that I've been thinking about quite a bit. And you mentioned if Bregman, Verlander, and Altuve are going to be free agents, the Astros have decisions to make. Do we extend any of these players, or all of these players, or two of these players? And if not, what are we doing for 2025? And Joe, if you're Dana Brown here, you don't want to just go through the season and then worry about it next November, December. You'd like to maybe get out front a little bit. So maybe moving a Bregman helps you get out front a little bit, but there's probably another opportunity or two on this roster to get out front, maybe extend your window beyond signing free agents. And that's probably, and again, I'm just going to, full disclosure, this is a guy you and I talked about before I hit the record button. Framber Valdez is in an interesting situation with the Houston Astros. This guy, I mean, we know how good he is, one of the better left-handers in the American League, in all of baseball. I think he's got 2 straight 4-win seasons. He's 30 years old, does not have a long-term deal, has 2 years of control left. He's made 31 starts, two years in a row, through 200 innings in 2022 and 198 last year. That is an innings-eating left-hander. That's a number 2 in a lot of rotations. That's a really good number 3 in a great rotation. And in some rotations, he's your number 1. This is a really good starting pitcher that they don't have locked up right now, Joe. You could do some damage on the trade market for Framber Valdez. And I think Dylan Cease's price will tell us what Framber Valdez might be worth.
Yeah, like I mentioned, that farm system needs some help. They need an infusion in younger talent. There's just, you're not going to blow this window wide open with Spencer Giddy for the next 10 years, right? And one guy that we haven't brought up that certainly plays a big part in all this is Kyle Tucker. Like, Kyle Tucker is up after 2025, and that's a $32 million, $34 million player. Like, he's a 5-win outfielder who's 5 tools. He's not going to be cheap, and he's young too. I think he debuted, well, he was kicked around through part-time play, like age 21, 22, 23, but he's going to be a free agent at probably age 29. he's not going to be cheap. So,
Yeah,
man, like I think the Astros, I think the Astros are in a position right now where they've kind of got to shuffle the deck a little bit and decide who's going to stick around, who's going to be around in 2026 and 2027. And, maybe the cards that don't fit in the long-term future are moved to kind of try and extend this competitive window, because we've been talking about it. Jason, we've been talking about it since what? Shoot, March of 2021. Like, the window is closing. The window is shutting. They didn't have draft picks. Everyone got expensive. The Astros' path to 95 wins is a lot more narrow. And I think at some point you just have to say, if we want a chance of this thing being a thing in 2026, 2027, 2028, we got to make some decisions.
Because they're not going to pick high enough in any draft in the next couple of years. It doesn't look like, at least, last year, this year, next year, to get those 2-3 players like the Nationals did with Strasburg and Harper to completely turn your fortunes around. They're not going to have that opportunity, and their farm system might be, I don't know, Joe, this is something you're working on now for January, February. That farm system might be one of the very worst in baseball.
29.
There 29. You go. After making those trades for making the trade for Justin Verlander. I mean, that was that ate up a good portion of what they had at the top of their farm system. They're like they're a unique player development system over there, but there's not magic. You have to have the talent over there to develop. So let me throw something at you really quick. Beyond Bregman, Altuve, and Verlander, who are 3 pending free agents. They would be free agents after the 2024 season unless some sort of extension is worked out. If I gave you the 2 names, Framber Valdez and Kyle Tucker, and said, based on the potential trade return you see, based on the value to my organization in Houston, if you're the GM and you're the owner there and you're running things, if you're trading one of them, which one of them are you trading in this particular market?
Oh, that is a good question.
I think you can make an argument for either one, right? With all the pitching that's going around. Yeah.
I think just because of the value of a position player and a 5-tool position player and 2 years of control, and the fact that there's just no bats, Kyle Tucker is way more valuable than Cody Bellinger, and it's not even close. Because of that, I think Kyle Tucker probably nets you a better return. I think Kyle Tucker probably nets you something in the ballpark of what Luis Robert would get you. Probably not quite that much, but it would be in the conversation.
But those same things, Joe, those same things suggest you shouldn't trade him.
Exactly.
Because he's that rare. It's going to be that much harder to replace.
Yeah. I mean, if I was Houston, I would try and extend Kyle Tucker ASAP. And I would probably try and move. I would try and move a pitcher, I think.
Yeah, Valdez, even though they're low on pitching, it seems to be a little bit easier, at least like today, tomorrow, this winter, replacing Framber Valdez if you moved him than it would be replacing Kyle Tucker. But man, if you trade Kyle Tucker and you get the right guys back, I mean, you could set yourself up for 2025 and 2026 really, really well. You could end up being in a better position than you are with Kyle Tucker, barring an extension. Extending him is by far the best thing. And if you're out there listening and you're thinking, why are these guys drooling all over Kyle Tucker? Why the hell not? 24, 25, and 26 years old. He's been a 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9 win player. He's averaged 144 games a season. Last year, he had 284, 29 bombs, put up if you're a WRC Plus fan, and I am, a 140 WRC Plus. That's the second time in 3 years he's been over 140. And in his slightly down year, he was a 129. He's 26 years old. He's going to be 27 in January. So you're right, Joe. He'll be a 29-year-old free agent. Locking up Kyle Tucker, I would imagine, is a priority for the Astros. And if it's not, I'm a little bit puzzled. Left-handed bat with power. Look at all the contacts here. We're talking these conversations we're hearing around the league is, these high strikeout guys in Philadelphia and Minnesota and Seattle and teams trying to go away from that. Kyle Tucker, career strikeout rate of 16%. It was under 14% a year ago. This guy's really, really good and maybe one of the more underrated players in all of baseball right now, Joe.
Yeah, you know how many 4.4 let alone 4.6, 4.7, 4.8. You know how many 4.4 F-WAR seasons Cody Bellinger has? One.
And that was
And
his
he's been
MVP
in the
year.
league a very long time. Yeah, it was a 7.5 win season. Like, I'm not going to take anything away from the guy,
Sure.
but Kyle Tucker consistently has been better and better and better. And he's not even really, I mean, he's kind of just walking into the prime of his career. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think this kid has, now I'm talking like a scout. I think he has 5.5 win potential written all over him for the next few years. And he's got, for me at least, he's got an outside shot of going to the Hall of Fame. I think he could get to 60 F-WAR.
Yeah, that's crazy. Speaking of that, by the way, if Jose Altuve retired after this season, is he a Hall of Famer for you?
Without question.
Yeah, I think he
I
is.
mean, I wouldn't vote for him. I wouldn't vote
Right.
for him because of the scandal. Like, I
Sure.
wouldn't.
Right.
But the numbers, I mean, the numbers don't lie. But let me ask you this: like, I think the bigger issue with moving Kyle Tucker for me would be you look at that lineup, and all of a sudden for the future, yeah, you'd have great prospects coming in, and those would fit somewhere in there. But all of a sudden, you're relying on an Alec, a Bregman that's out of his prime, an Altuve that's going to be, how old is Altuve going to be? 35. I mean, he's
107, Joe. Yeah. he's 33.
double
He's
it
been
up.
around. He's been around 25 years, but he's 33. He won't be 34 until early May.
Yeah. And I know we talk about like how the body and everything projects. Like 5'7", 180 does not lend well into your mid 30s. Trust me, I know. I'm aware. He's sore every day.
Yeah. He had another great year though. Man, I mean,
Yeah.
2022, he put up a 164 WRC plus, almost a 7-win season. He was a 4-win player this past year, despite the fact that he only played 90 games. He hit over 300 for the second year in a row. I think he put up his second best on base percentage of his entire career this past year. But if you're looking for potential signs, I won't call them signs, but potential signs that maybe Jose Altuve is slowing down just a little bit. Well, for one, the injury and the strikeout rate. The strikeout rate did jump 3% this past year. That's something to just keep an eye on. I'm not saying it's definitely a sign, but it could be. And he's not one of those guys, Joe, that goes out and puts up like 48% hard hit rates. He's a guy that just makes a ton of contact, and a lot of his contact is medium or hard. He just doesn't hit tricklers to the shortstop and pop up a whole lot. Just a lot of solid contact. It's something to keep an eye on as Altuve gets into his mid-30s there in Houston. If you're Houston, are you aggressive in the pitching market? Because we've been talking about maybe trading Valdez or extending him too. But Justin Verlander is, again, he's older than Jose Altuve, and Altuve's triple digits already, as we just mentioned. What do you do for the Astros this winter before we get through the offseason? What would you do if you're running the Astros? You focusing on pitching, or are you focusing on turning Valdez and Bregman or even Tucker into something that kind of extends your window?
Well, I mean, they've got to add pitching of some regard, right? I mean, next year, even if you have to assume Justin Verlander is going to deal with just general soreness as a 40-year-old pitcher. So what do they've got? They've got Justin Verlander. They've got Framber Valdez. I don't know what they're going to do with Jose Urquidy and Luis Garcia. I mean, they flip-flop those guys back and forth in and out of the rotation. I don't know if they're both going to be options out of the rotation this year.
Right.
Lance McCullers is coming back. You do have Christian Javier, and JP France played a pretty big role. I think you're probably ultimately going to see Hunter Brown in the bullpen to start 2024. I think they could probably do without going on the higher end of the starting pitching market, but the Astros seem like the perfect type of a fit for a guy like Seth Lugo, who can play the hybrid role. He can come out of the bullpen.
How about Marcus Stroman?
So yeah,
how about Marcus Stroman?
I think that's too rich. I think it's too rich because I think Marcus Stroman's going to get at least 4 years. You would think he's going to get 3 or 4 years, and I just don't know if they can commit.
But not $25 million a year, right? Like, he's not getting Sonny Gray money.
I mean, I think Stroman could get 4 and 80. Do you not?
I mean, but that's $5 million less than Sonny Gray got on AAV. So if he goes 4 years, I could see that. But we're not talking about $100 million, is what I'm saying. Right?
No, but I just mean if you're throwing $20 million a year on the payroll through 2027. I think that just has implications with some of the guys that we just talked about. Are you going to add Marcus Stroman because you plan on moving Framber? That would make sense. That would make sense, but you have to have room to retain some of this talent in 2026, I think.
Although if Verlander's coming off the books, and I would imagine he is, I would imagine there's no extension for Verlander. That's a lot of money off the books. And if you're not going to bring back Bregman, that's a lot of money off the books. So I think your payroll looks fine moving forward. If you go add a couple of $20+ million guys, I don't know, I wouldn't go any higher than Stroman, but I think if I'm the Astros, and not that I wouldn't have interest in Lugo, in a guy like that, because I love guys that can swing back and forth. And one of my most underrated bullpen targets out there for any team that's looking for any kind of bullpen help is Junis. Is Jacob Junis, because he can swing back and forth and that slider, and he can start for you a couple of times and then go back to the bullpen and kind of swing back and forth. Very underrated. I think you can get him for a couple of $1 million. But if you're Houston, though, like, man, I'm not relying on Urquidy or France or Garcia coming off injury. Yeah. Or, and I guess my big question is, what do I think Hunter Brown actually is? Am I convinced that he needs to be in the bullpen? Because if that's the case, I'm setting my sights on the Stroman types and not settling for Seth Lugo. I'm going for a guy who I know can give me 25 to 28 starts, not a guy who has a limited track record of doing that. I think I would go a little more, a little bigger with a guy like Stroman, not necessarily that Stroman, and maybe they get in the market for, somebody that's a trade candidate too, off the top of the market. There are lots of teams out there that have these mid rotation types that they're looking to dump because now they're becoming arbitration, expensive. So I wonder if Houston gets involved in that as well. I think the Astros are a fascinating team this offseason because I just don't know what to expect from Dana Brown. We don't. He's a scouting director to us. We don't know Dana Brown, the GM, yet. I guess we're going to learn, right?
Yeah. And another thing, and we can end on this, but it is kind of interesting that I think if you re-sign Jose Altuve past 2023, he's probably going to take a pay cut, right? I mean, they're not going to sign a 35-year-old second baseman to more than $26 million a year. He's making $26 million this year. Maybe it's 2 years and $60 million. I don't know, but I would be surprised if he got
you wouldn't think
big
it would
payday.
You wouldn't think it would be $100+ million. You wouldn't think it would be.
No, I wouldn't be surprised it'd be less. Right. It's got to be 3 years or less, I would think.
But they gave Jose Abreu 3 and 58. So although not Dana Brown, Dana Brown didn't. He's a little bit younger than Justin Verlander, so he's like 98. The delay there kills. The delay there. I think he's 34. I think Abreu's 34 now. We'll see how he.
I don't know. Altuve is going to be 35, and he's going to be 35 in 2025. I would probably offer him something like 3 years and $70 million. Give him $23 million a year.
Right. So I don't know. So you'd give him $23 million a year for his age 35, 36, and 37 seasons?
Listen, he's coming off a 4.5 win season. If he does 4.5 wins again next year, he's not going to come in cheaper than that.
Right.
But
yeah. And by the way, I was way off. The decline
is on the horizon.
I was way off on Jose Abreu. I don't know why I said he was 34. He's going to be 37 in January. He's got 2 years and almost. He's got 2 years and almost $40 million left on that deal.
Yeah, similar. I mean, he's a first baseman, $20 million. I don't think Altuve is going to get $26 million a year AAV for 3 years after next season, but we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. He's still been really, really good. It's been interesting to see how the Astros handle things under Dana Brown. They have a new scouting director there in Houston as well. He's redoing. They have a new pitching coach over the last year or so. Things are different in Houston, and seeing them try to hang on here is going to be really interesting to learn which route they want to take. Do they want to be aggressive with veterans? And it kind of seems like they set themselves up to do that too, Joe, with that trade last year. Or was that just kind of a swan song? I guess we'll learn here in the next couple of weeks, probably see how
they gave up a lot for a swan song, man. They gave up a lot for a swan song.
They did. And it looks like the swan song could be this year. We'll see. Guys are getting older, man. You just never know when guys are going to start falling off a cliff. You just never know. We saw it with Abreu last year at 35, 36 years old. So we'll see what happens. Not that I'm expecting it from Altuve, but we'll see what happens with those guys and Verlander, and there's lots of decisions to make in Houston. Parting shot, Joe? What else is on your mind as the winter meetings?
Oh, I've got a parting shot.
You got a parting shot? Oh, I feel like this is going to be personal.
It's at you.
Which is fair.
It is at you.
All right. All right, what's
This is
up?
going to spark some conversation. This has been eating at me for 2 weeks since the last time we podcasted, and I wanted to bring it up with you live on the air.
Okay.
Uh, last week or 2 weeks ago, actually, I think it was after we were done recording, you said that WSU, by the way, congrats to you, Dub. A great season, no
Sure.
doubt about it. It hurts
Yep.
me to say that, but
Yep.
you said that WSU's president and athletic director dug themselves this grave by not being proactive and getting themselves to a new conference.
Sure.
I have that's been eating at me for a week and a half
Okay.
because I look at it like this.
Really quick before you answer, did they get
Okay.
themselves into another conference? Did they do that?
No,
Okay.
no. But let me explain the analogy. I think of WSU. I'm not naive. I know that WSU is on a much smaller playing field, a much smaller financial ecosystem, a much smaller
Sure.
town.
Mhm.
But I look at it like this. You play baseball
Mhm.
from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. You play with all your friends. You're all the same size. You're all tiny, right? You're all running around, just doing the best. And WSU's tiny, and they're competing, and they're keeping up with everyone. Oregon State too. Fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. And then you hit ninth grade, and suddenly all the other kids got a lot bigger. And you can still perform.
Mhm.
You're still a baller. You're still
Mhm.
keeping up, but suddenly you're not getting picked to go on teams. And you're not getting picked by the high school teacher to play on the team because you're too small.
Mhm.
I think that's a good analogy for what happened with WSU. They still are a good team. They're a good program, but they haven't gotten the respect because they're such a smaller program. And I think to
What
the
makes them
people
a good
that I've had
what makes
people
them a
reach
good
out,
program? What makes them a good
I'm
program?
just talking. I'm talking specifically wins, just specifically wins. That's all. I'm talking 7 straight years with a bowl game. I'm talking being a force in the Pac-12 for the better part of 10 years. That's all I'm saying. 3 Rose Bowls. Um, that's my thing. So I guess the frustration for me is my parting shot is I think fans think that WSU's athletic director and their president didn't do enough to get in front of this, to get themselves into a position where they can get into a big conference. My counter to that is they've been trying for years to do anything. They've been trying not to have the Apple Cup on Friday after Thanksgiving in Pullman for 15 years.
Mhm.
But when you're matched up chest to chest with financial behemoths in a conference that you just financially and socioeconomically
Mhm.
do not fit in with, because they didn't.
Mhm.
And it's shown with the fact
And
that they
they
aren't
never
going to a
have,
big
right?
conference.
They
They
never really
never
have,
have.
right? Okay.
They have been a beneficiary of the schools that they've competed with. There's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
They're an agriculture school, no doubt about it. But to think that they didn't try to do enough to save the Pac-12 and to save their status in a big conference, it kind of bugs me. They were always on the chopping block. They've been on the chopping block for 15 years.
So here's the thing. I didn't say they didn't try. I said they didn't do enough because enough means they would have done something, like something would have got done. And I didn't say a big conference. I meant in a better position than they're in right now. That's why I feel sorry that
Yeah.
people are going to lose jobs. I hate the fact that this whole, transformation in football dictates, football is king, is going to hurt non-football programs at a lot of these schools, not just Washington State and Oregon State, but even the Arizonas, maybe even Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA as well. I hate that part of it. I do. But I don't feel sorry for the football program at Oregon State or Washington State at all, because like maybe they couldn't get into the Big 10 or the Big 12 even, but was there maybe an opportunity for them to get themselves into a better situation than they're sitting in right now with no, direct conference, affiliation? Yes, there was. And I think they just shot too high or hoped that they sat around and both schools sat around to some degree and hoped that this just wouldn't come to fruition so they could stay in the Pac-12. Because again, I do understand this, staying in keeping the Pac-12 together would have been better for Oregon State and Washington State. But where's the backup plan? Where's the foresight to go out and say, okay, if this doesn't happen, get us into the, whatever it is, the Mountain West Conference or whatever. And I understand it's not the same and it's not nearly as lucrative as the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 is gone. And so it was be in the Midwest Conference or the Mountain West Conference or whatever, or be sitting out there as basically kind of an independent. Like what is, and I realize they can schedule, work out schedules and play whoever, but they're not in a great spot right now. And that's because they didn't make something happen at the end of the day. I hate what those other schools did. I hate the court thing. I hate that Washington went after the money.
I'm not talking about the school presidents or the program as a object. I'm not talking about the athletic director. I'm talking about the fans. I'm talking about the alumni.
Sure.
I'm talking about the average Joe like me who went to the school and left on the side of the street without a conference to root for. And I think, to your point, the situation that they're in, I think the Mountain West is a foregone conclusion. Like WSU and Oregon State are going to hold enough financial clout after all this is said and done to reverse merge as many teams as they want from the Mountain West to keep probably what will end up being a Pac-8, maybe a Pac-10 going in the future. So their financial future is going to be much more anemic, but they're going to have a conference. They're going to be just fine.
But probably not next year, right? But probably not next year. Probably not for 2024.
Next year they've already agreed to play. They've already agreed to play 6 games against the Mountain West. They've already got their schedule filled out. Like they've got that all figured out, and they're probably going to walk away with so much damn money from the University of Washington going to the CFP and the bowl game revenue that comes into the Pac-12 and just collecting all that, that they're going to be fine financially. The frustration for me, just as a Cougar fan, is it seems as though I don't know. It's just I wish there were more fans of the University of Washington, and I understand that it's a rivalry, of course. I wish they would have a little more compassion for the fact that the rival school, their in-state public rival, is losing everything essentially while they're going on to bigger and better things.
Wait a second,
and
you just said
that's probably
didn't you just say that Washington State was going to be fine financially?
They are, but the fans aren't. The fans are. We're losing 120 years of football tradition, and it's going to go on. We're going to play Boise State. We're going to play San Jose State, San Diego State. We're going to go to Hawaii. We're going to be fine. But like a guy like me, 33 years old, all I've ever known is playing up and down I-5. That's a tough pill to swallow. And it's a bit of I'll just give you a quick, and then we'll move on from this and this podcast. Washington State is like the only thing that I've ever known. It's both my parents went there, my grandparents went there, my cousins went there, and I grew up a Coug. I went to every single home game, 6 hours with my dad, every game. It was the only school I was ever going to go to. And a ton of that pride comes from the fact I'm going to a Pac-12 school. I'm going to go to a Pac-12 school, get a Pac-12 education. I'm going to live that college dream. It almost feels for naught at this point. And as an identity, I struggle with the fact that, I'm going to have kids and I have to wonder, are my kids going to be as invested as I was in going to a Mountain West school? That's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough change in just, I guess, ethos and identity.
Sure. In my defense, it's not the fans that I don't give a crap about. It's not the fans at all. It's not that. And I was actually on Washington State and Oregon State side with all the court stuff. Like, look, here's how it's written. You're not a part of the Pac-12 anymore as of the end of the season. Go away. That whole thing was garbage.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was just aimed at the school, and maybe mostly at the people running the school and running the football program, the people that had maybe some opportunity to improve their situation. I don't know. I gotta be honest with you. Cal and Stanford to the ACC, right? That's a thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Washington State and Oregon State are far more interesting football programs than Cal and Stanford really ever are. I mean, Stanford had their day with Harbaugh, had their day with
I would rather be in the position of Washington State and Oregon State right now than I would be at all interested in being a fan as a Cal Bear.
Right.
I've actually tweeted
this too. As a fan of a team that's going to the Big Ten, I'm jacked about it too. The idea that you're going to play, Michigan and Ohio State and Wisconsin and Penn State, you're going to play probably 2 of those teams a year, if not 3. I love the idea. I think it just ups the ante for everybody. So I love it. I'm jacked about it. But and again, I tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago. I would trade, if I was the Big Ten, like Rutgers and Maryland for Oregon State and Washington State in a freaking heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I would trade those. I mean,
it might happen.
If it's really all about money and it's all about the best football. Yeah. I mean, I get wanting Rutgers in it because it's New York, and Maryland because I guess Baltimore's in Maryland. Then. Like, but man, yeah,
Philadelphia.
Right. Like, I don't, from a football standpoint, not even close. Not even close. Washington State, Oregon State are far more interesting and make far more sense, even though there'd be more travel, because then it would be easier for USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington to continue rivalries, but also just play each other and cut down the travel a little bit. The first time Washington travels to Rutgers, I'm going to giggle because it's stupid. It makes no sense at all. Like, or Rutgers to Washington, to be honest with you.
Projecting out 4 years. Let's go 4 years out. Cal and Stanford will be in the Pac-10. They just will. Like, the ACC is going to fold. I'm sorry. With what happened to Florida State today, with how pissed off Clemson is. I think South Carolina in the SEC?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember now.
Yes. North Carolina is in the SEC.
So they're fine. Yeah. North Carolina, like, the ACC is going to maybe not fold, but greatly diminish. And the fact that Cal and Stanford took TV fractional deals to travel across the country, and the ACC only has to make it to Dallas to play those home games.
Yeah.
There's no way that's going to survive. No way. So I think they end up back in the Pac-10 with Washington State, Oregon State, and 4 to 6 other teams on the West Coast. But yeah, man, I'll leave it at this. I don't know. I'll leave it at this. I really will. I don't think there's much more Kirk Schultz and Pat Chun at Washington State, or the leadership at Oregon State, could have done. I don't think there was any merry-go-round at all feasible that they end up in one of these Power 4 conferences, Big 10, Big 12. I don't think they could ever latch their wagon to Oregon and Washington. That was unrealistic.
I don't think so either. Yep. I never thought that.
So
never thought that. Never thought that at all.
So yeah, I mean,
although it should have been feasible.
Pac-2 money.
It should have been feasible, but I agree that it wasn't. I do hope those programs and I do hope those rivalries live, and it does sound like they both will, because getting rid of Oregon State and Washington State would be an absolute travesty. Even in a year when one team was a top 5 team in the country and Washington State really struggled out, you saw how close the Apple Cup was. That happens you've paid attention to this too. You've watched it as an alum. Like, it doesn't matter what that record is when you play rivalry games, because I mean, occasionally it's a blowout, but sometimes the final score does not make a whole lot of sense. And that's the,
can we agree on one thing and then get out of here?
I don't think so.
I never hope anyone loses their jobs.
No, that's garbage.
So glad.
Yep. Never.
I am so glad the Pac-12 referees, I'm very glad that they are going to be refereeing somewhere other than this coast. It's been so awful for a decade and nobody stands for it. That'll be nice not to look forward to on Saturdays.
That is a perfect parting shot. A little football to end the FSS Plus podcast. Hey, Joe, thanks. We'll talk next week, man.
All right, buddy.
So just chill till the next episode.